Hello, everyone. Welcome to the HockeyBuzzcast. Russ, what's going on today?
Well, we're going to talk about the Super Bowl for a minute. I believe Kevin and I got it right, and you and Mike got it wrong. I think that's the way it shook out. It did come down to a lot of the things we talked about. Pat Mahomes, the Kansas City offensive line being better than people had said, and just Pat Mahomes. He is one of the great quarterbacks of all time. Now, I know Eagles fans are complaining about that holding call, but nobody complained about the catch that all of a sudden wasn't a catch and fumble and touchdown. So I think they cancel each other out, if you ask me. And I think it was a good game. I looked at that game, and it was interesting because with 2 drives into the second half, I looked at my wife and I said, it's going to come down to the last possession and Pat Mahomes. And it did. And then somebody else texted me hoping, because they're betting on this and hoping that Devonta Smith would get one more catch. They needed like a few more yards out of him. And it was the 5 minutes left. And I'm like, I don't think the Eagles are getting the ball back. So that was the kind of confidence I had in Pat Mahomes, because I saw the way that he and really Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy were breaking down the Eagles defense. That was the other part.
Kev, I thought it was laughable that 4 days ago, Roger Goodell said, this is the refereeing in the NFL was the best that it has ever been. That had to be sort of like, you were just tempting fate when you say that, because I thought that call was ridiculous. Now, I thought the call that Russ was talking about could have gone either way. The funny thing was the call that may have cost Philadelphia the game, I think it was late second quarter, was 3rd and inches. What was that? Third and inches, a false start. That ended. They were going to do the rugby scrum and get the first down. They call a false start, 3rd and 5, and on the 3rd and 5, Hurts fumbles the ball and it goes the other way for a touchdown. I think the Eagles were putting the coup de grace on that game if they had gone down and scored the touchdown, and that turned the momentum completely around.
Yeah. I mean, the catch, I said right away I didn't think it was a catch, just because I had watched so many games. And that call, I don't, the fact that so many people have looked at that, and if you go on Twitter, all you got to do is there's a lot of people that well who think that was a catch, and a lot of people who well who and you respect who don't think it is. Like, we've all watched it on, multiple times, and we can't agree on it. And that's just the way it's going to go. I mean, even replay can't make it perfect. But, as Russ said, and he's right on the money, I mean, to me, that was a Mahomes victory. Yeah. You pay him to manage success, and he does that. And he figures out a way, and the play that, the running back going down before he hit the end zone. Yeah. Now you're playing the analytics there, because you don't know for sure 100% you'll make the field goal. But if you get that touchdown, now you give them 1 minute and 50 seconds to go down. And you know what? I like their odds on a 2-point conversion with Hurts.
With that line, sure.
Yeah. So I thought that was a brilliant move. They played that just perfectly, and Russ said it was right on. I mean, I said to my wife, now you just got to burn time. Yeah. And on that first play of that drive, the guy ran out of bounds, and I'm thinking, what are you doing? If you remember, it was Juju I think it was Juju ran out of bounds after he caught the pass, and I'm thinking, you're not part of the game plan here. So it was a great game, though. I mean, I really enjoyed that game.
They left Philadelphia 8 seconds, and the only team that would have blown with 8 seconds is Buffalo. So
the moment that I thought was really like the most telling, honestly, was when this team that goes for it on 4th down a lot. Obviously, they're a 4th down team, and it's part of the fun of them deciding to punt towards the in the second half there.
They're on the wrong side of the 50.
Yeah, they're on the wrong side of the 50, but still, I mean, the punting that, but not just them deciding to punt, but for the punt return to come all the way back to like the 5-yard line. I mean, that's like that's a big swing. On but
okay, it's a risk.
Can I just say? I mean, the NFL has a number of things that they should be embarrassed about, including the officiating. But that's everybody complains about that. But that's subjective, and that's maybe something that's not in their control. What is in control in their control is the fact that they put down a fresh layer of sod on the field in Arizona, and the field was and it wasn't the Rihanna halftime stuff that was happening in the first.
That was terrible, especially
when the kicker misses a field goal, the punt where Kadarius Toney runs it back, the punter slipped and it was a bad punt. That field was horrendous, and the NFL should be ashamed of themselves.
I agree with that one.
Well, I'll tell you, Zig Fracassi is a friend of mine who works for SiriusXM. He tweeted to me, that's been a problem for numerous years now, not just this year on that field with that surface. So this is something that the league has sort of ignored for a while.
Yeah, well, you're right about one of the things, Mike, which is that the field was horrible. And, I think both sides pointed that out after the game. But, it was equal for both teams. So be it. What you're wrong about is, I guarantee you, absolutely beyond a doubt, that the NFL is not embarrassed today by that Super Bowl. They're not embarrassed. Not one little bit. By it. They had a great game. Everybody tuned in. The commercials were fun. The halftime entertainment was off the charts. To me, it was scary though. Having on those things, you could see them. They could see them shake.
Oh my God! You put Buckley up there. I don't care.
Oh my God! That was
to the stage or not. Or not, I'm not doing
that pregnant and performing like that was pretty freaking impressive.
It was great. Great at lip syncing.
Yeah, there was it was a terrible performance, Mike. I'm surprised you even watched it.
No, it was a great performance.
An 8 months pregnant woman.
What's Mike's take out of it? Tell him what your take is, Mike. Great lip sync.
Great lip syncing, and
that's Mike's take on that halftime show.
I could have done without the crotch grabbing, but other than that, it was
that's Mike's take. Yeah.
That's
unbelievable.
We trashed the Puppy Bowl last time, Mike. So the Puppy Bowl was good. Puppy Bowl was solid.
We had Mike Square hang
really good. Yeah.
Mike Take. We do.
Don't you agree the Puppy Bowl was solid?
I didn't watch 1 second of it, Eck. Sorry.
Eck, this is on you. You should make sure Mike Square lights up with Mike's take, and his opinion is not the opinion of the rest of the
of the universe. Spectacular, death-defying halftime performance, and Mike's take is good lip syncing. And I could have lived without the crotch grabbing.
I don't know what that's going to be.
I will give her credit though. You'd never catch me dead on one of those platforms. It was really high, really scary. Thing.
Yeah, I mean it was fabulous, and I think a lot of people on Twitter. I saw this, and it really amused me because I was one of those people where you heard the song and you didn't have known that it belonged to her. You recognize the song right away, and you go, "Oh my God, that's hers!" So I was an old man guilty of that, but I mean that was just unbelievable, and I was surprised to read on Twitter, and I guess I should know this, but they don't pay performers for doing halftime shows, which I did not know. Only the people heard her backup.
Apple did, because that's why it's sponsored by Apple, so I think they paid her.
They paid the she doesn't get paid, but they paid the other artists, the people that more the 100 or 200 dancers that she had with her. They pay them, so and they got standard $1,000 a day. So
I did know that because I've been through.
But obviously, they get huge financial reward. Like they pointed out, the story that I read on it said last year all the acts that participated got immediate hits and downloads of their songs, and she's going to launch a. Do you still call them albums? What do we call them now?
It's an album. So
anyway, she's expected to release a new album, so she'll benefit in that.
Here's one last thing that I had no idea, and I heard it after this show, and I'm not plugged into Rihanna, obviously. I know a few songs, but I didn't know that the Umbrella song was written for Britney Spears, and she turned it down.
Wow.
I did not know that either.
Any nomination for your favorite commercial? Funny thing was the one that they're rating as the best one I missed. They must have been getting pizza or wings or something like that. But the Ben Affleck Dunkin' Donuts commercial,
that was funny.
I liked it then. Yeah, that was real early, Mike. Real early.
Yeah, I love the Caddyshack beer one, whichever. It might have been Mitch Michelob Ultra, like I had mentioned on the show.
Yeah.
That was great. I liked it. I like
the Bradley Cooper one for T-Mobile
with his mom for T-Mobile.
Oh yeah.
I gotta tell you though, as a DC Comics fan, watching Marvel pummel them for the last 15 years, the fact that they pulled off the Flash finally, because I gotta tell you, that was at the Philly Comic-Con like 5 years ago when Ezra Miller, the star of that, was talking about it. But then the pandemic came, and then he had trouble with the law, and nobody knew what was going to happen with this movie. But when they showed the 5 Batman suits, and they actually showed Keaton, I didn't know if they were going to show Keaton in the commercial. That really made me feel like a little kid because I was like, wow, you know what? That was awesome.
They got me with one line, "I'm Batman." I was like, okay,
that's great.
Yeah, that's great. I did enjoy the Miller Lite Coors beer, and then at the end Blue Moon. No, this is Blue Moon commercial, right? That was fun. There were a lot of there was some good.
The one that was the sort of the punk move was, I can't remember what the website is, but everybody watching the game who had a smart TV thought that their smart TV was changing. It was Tubi or something like that. It was changing over to something else. I'm like, what's going on?
You say that because so there's a history of our, because at that point my kid who's got to go to school next day, we're watching TV up in our bedroom, right? Yeah. So we're all in the bedroom. Our kid usually falls asleep in our bed. We're next to our bed and this other thing, and then we're all sitting there, and I historically roll over onto the remote once in a while and just change the channel, like while they're watching TV. Like I'll be sleeping and I'll roll over on the remote, and then they all screamed at me.
Right. I said to my niece, "What are you doing?" And
nothing. I didn't fall for it. I don't know why. Maybe I just didn't care.
It was
my daughter fell for it. Yeah, and thought I had done that.
Yeah, I was awake and not even moving, and I'm like, "What? I'm not even moving." But they're still screaming at me, thinking I rolled over onto it.
I don't even know the commercial, but the Breaking Bad one was good. And I thought Travolta had a little trouble. He had trouble.
I thought it was really good.
I thought that was good too. I mean, how much did they have to pay him to do that?
I thought it was terrific. I thought the nostalgia of it, and a lot of old people
was great. No
question. The thing was, so I'm sorry, the nostalgia for a minute, but Zach Braff is no replacement for Olivia Newton-John, and it actually made me sad that
what's he gonna do?
It actually made me sad that Olivia Newton-John had passed away, and they're doing a Grease thing without her. So anyway, sorry.
All right,
that's one way to look at it.
Might as well just start it. Can't go take it downer than that.
Hello, Hockey World.
That's right.
It's Monday, February 13th, 2022.
2023.
We got to check the year.
I'm Michael Agello, and you're not.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Kevin Allen, and don't worry about it because our viewers think that's just part of your shtick. So
I wish it was, Kevin. I wish it was.
Yeah, that's okay. Just go with it. Just tell them that it's just part of your shtick.
Thing I do all the time. And I'm Michael, and you're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. It's the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday-ish to talk to you about the comings goings in the hockey world. And the funny thing yesterday is I wrote my blog yesterday was all eyes are on Arizona, because yesterday we woke up and it was like, okay, we're going to get the Jeff Chikrin trade. It's going to happen, because the Coyotes,
Jacob.
they're going to trade the color commentator from the Edmonton Oilers.
All right, Jeff Chikrin.
Jacob
Chikrin. I'm sorry.
Just say Chikrin. We know who you're talking about.
Chikrin.
Yeah.
We thought
I've done that this season already once. So
yeah, right. So they put it out on social media that he's being held off for a trade purposes or something like that, right? And that we haven't seen a team do that before, and it was kind of interesting. So
not this far out. We've seen it done closer to the deadline.
A team to actually
what he's saying is they don't reveal that it's for trade purposes. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's accurate. I don't remember ever seeing that.
Right. So to me, and so then I called some people that I thought were involved in the Chikrin thing, and I said, because it immediately came out like L.A. looked like the team, and it came out with that Clark was going to be involved in the trade, and later at night, a bunch of people got in touch with Clark and said they told me I'm not involved in the trade, and it really felt like to the other people around the league who were involved in this, that this was a ploy, that this was a really set up ploy, that they put out that they were getting closer, they're sitting him back to try to get somebody to step up more than, to make someone think that there's a deal done.
Yeah. I mean, because I thought it was a massive mistake if they put Clark in that deal, to be honest, because honestly, while Chikrin is a very good defenseman, Clark has a chance to be better. And I get it. But the thing about the Kings is they're not winning the Stanley Cup this year. They're probably not winning it next year. And then you're running into the end of Chikrin's contract as to whether you're deciding to extend him or not. And by then Clark's ready. So that, to me, that's why that part didn't make sense.
Well, the thing that, and they talked about it this morning on Jeff Merrick's show on Sportsnet, that they think the deal was close, but that it hit a snag. Now they didn't say what the snag was, but it sounds like the Kings wanted Arizona to take a big contract back. And the only thing I can think of, Russ, if it's somebody who's not on the books right now, would maybe be Cal Peterson.
Right.
And Cal Peterson's got a couple more years at $5 million,
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 more at $5 million. And if that's the case, Arizona being a team that, right now budget constraints because they're in a building that, the Rochester Americans could outdraw them. That might be a consideration. I mean, I just think that, this has played out long enough, and I don't know whether Bill Armstrong is going to get what he supposedly wants. I think he'll get close. Maybe they have to wait another week or two, Kev, to put pressure on these teams to get 2 or 3 teams competing with each other. But Russ and I were talking about this. Is Jacob Chikrin worth what they're asking? And I have doubts, and that's why he's
never played more than 63 games.
Right.
Yeah.
Never.
Well, I would still make the deal just because, he is, the potential there. We never have seen him with a real good team, so it's really kind of hard to know, how he would fit in. One thing I would, I agree with Mike. I think what happened is I think they really thought they were getting close and getting there. And I've heard the same thing Mike did, that it was the late inclusion of, take back the salary back. And, a lot of people, think in terms of, well, you got plenty of room, you can take a salary back. But as Mike alluded to, and I don't think it has anything to do with the arena. If they were in the old arena, would have been the same thing, because I think they would have lost even more money there. Right. But they're losing so much money that taking back a guy and, paying extra $2 million, adding on top of, whatever it is, and I don't know the actual number, but say it's $30 million they're going to lose this year. Well, to make it $32 million just is, they're just not going to tolerate that. Yeah, they're not going to do that. So that's what I heard kind of hold this up. And Clark, they don't want to give him up. I do know that. So he's having a terrific season, and they want to bring him in as he's one of the guys. And they have other guys that they can give him, and obviously.
Oh, they've got a ton.
They've got Kupari and Turcotte and Byfield and Bjorn. Yeah. They have so many. And the thing is, Russ and I were talking about this before. They have so many first-round picks that they've drafted over the last 3 or 4 years. And many of them, even Byfield, who was second overall, they really haven't been developed to the point that they're really successful in the NHL. And I think it's a situation right now, Kev, they have to move these guys before people realize that maybe they're not as good, or maybe they just haven't been developed to be as good as they should be. And that's a failure of that organization to develop those players.
Yeah, either that or, just the guys weren't as good as people thought they were. So.
Sure, right.
Yeah, I mean, I still think it'll get done pretty quickly, though, because I think it's inspired. Like, it seemed pretty clear that Boston put a call in and said, okay, where are you at on this? And because they really, I think, are interested in trying to make this work if they can. But, they're not going to, break up their chances of making a good run for it. They want to enhance their chances. So, they're not getting anyone off the roster, and I don't know what else they could give. I mean, Russ can speak to that better than I can, but they can give up first round draft picks. I think that's worth doing, but I don't think they have any top notch prospects.
Well, I mean, Lysell, Beecher.
Well, Lysell, I think we've already decided is going, but I think they're going to have
Lysell. There's Mason Lowry's a good one for them. I mean, they really only have 3 or 4 really good picks.
Yeah, that's the problem. So
prospects. That's really the issue.
The funny thing is that and the names that came up, the teams that came up, immediately before LA was Edmonton, and we can talk about the Carlson thing in a minute because that mentioned his blog.
I have something on Edmonton about that.
Right.
About Edmonton and Chikrin.
Right.
Just from talking to people in Edmonton, I'm sure Kevin's got better sources in Edmonton than I do, but just from talking to people around there, they said that they've never really been into Chikrin, and I don't know for what that's worth. That's been a guy that they haven't really ever put their head on.
Yeah, I do think they are interested in Carlson, but I don't know how close they are to do that because they want a lot for Carlson, and this idea that there's one price for if you take him at full value. I mean, that's absurd because you can't take him at full value. There's nobody who can take him at full value.
No, there's nobody.
So you can't even throw that into the conversation. So I don't know if they're going to get there or not, but he got 3 more points again last night. And
he's going to win the Norris. I mean, he is.
Yeah, and he's on a pace of more than 100 points now.
The report that's out there said that Edmonton would only be able to take Carlson back at around $6.5 to $7 million, which means retaining $4.5 to $5 million on the part of San Jose. Okay, I don't think San Jose is going to do that after they essentially gave away Brent Burns to Carolina. I don't think they're in a place to do that. So they have to get significant assets back for Carlson to sell this. And I don't think anybody's going to give him that with him having an $11.5 million salary. So I don't know.
No one's going to give everyone's going to ask for at least $4 million.
Sure.
So I mean, so that, like Kevin said, there's not at least $4 million. It's
Yeah, I think it's 4.5. I think you do have to get him down to 7, but
and at that point, there is a way of thinking that Edmonton, having Draisaitl, having McDavid in their prime right now, and a chance to pick up the best defenseman in the league, there's a real opportunity there for them to go to go all in here. This is their shot. Like they can't, right? I mean, they've got to see this as that. I think.
Yeah,
Carlson hasn't even spoken yet. Do we even know if he really wants to go anywhere?
Well, he's got complete control of it.
Carlson.
Yeah, I mean, I think what they're counting on for him is that once the deal's made, he'll review it and decide whether it meets his needs. But I mean, I think you're right on this. That's there's we've become almost too antiseptic on these trades, and we forget the kind of the romance of it. But the romance of Carlson fitting with the dynamic Connor McDavid and Draisaitl and that go offense that they run. Like he's an absolutely perfect fit. So, and especially playing the way he's played this season. And so I think, they'll work at it, but it may be one of those situations where it just doesn't work because, they can't give up anything. They can't give anybody off their roster that, they don't.
It defeats the purpose of the deal, Kev. I mean, you would say, okay, trade Darnell Nurse in a deal for Erik Karlsson. Well, that defeats the purpose of getting Karlsson.
But they can put Philip Broberg in there. That's easy. They can do that.
Yeah, but
salary.
That's not what they're looking. I mean, they want back big time assets. So
well, I mean, the funny thing about Broberg is if you made him a forward, he'd be a big time asset. This guy can skate. He's got a lot of ability. He's just not a good defenseman. Yeah,
but I think they don't want projects. They want definite guys for Karlsson.
And I think they definitely want to San Jose to take Puljujarvi on too. Is what I heard. But
the report that came out on Saturday that Edmonton is considering putting Puljujarvi on waivers. I mean, it's gotten that bad that they're actually thinking about that. I would think he'd get claimed, even though he's making what, $2.5 to $3 million. I think somebody would take a chance on him. But,
yeah, it would make sense. But what one GM said about waivers right now is everybody's trying to save every dollar for the trade deadline, the top teams. So,
right, yeah. It's an intriguing thing. I mean, I think it's going to right down to the wire. Erik Karlsson he's been involved in rumors. We've been talking about Erik Karlsson rumors my entire career. It feels like in some way, shape, or form. And he is definitely one of those guys who, if you talk to him about it personally, which I have a couple times, and he just doesn't care about it. Like he just really isn't thinking about it at all. And I think that you sit there and say, where does he want to go? I think Kevin's exactly right. They're not going. He says, don't tell me anything until you have a deal. And I'm not.
Here's a little update here. Craig Morgan, who covers the Coyotes, just reported that Andre Tournier, the head coach of the Coyotes, said Jacob Chychrun will remain out of the lineup until something happens. So they're making sure he doesn't get hurt before traded.
Yeah, and that just tells you they're close enough. They know they can get something. It's just a matter. If I had to guess, just based on experience, they're close enough to know that if they give in a little or the other side gives in a little, we can make it work.
It's up to them when they do this at this point.
Yeah,
it's kind of up to them when they do this or not, and they can. I think we're intrigued by other teams calling them, like Boston, like you said. And there's definitely things out there that they're now trying to play against each other for sure. It's their job.
Boston, Edmonton, Buffalo, Toronto. Those are the teams that.
Those are the ones I heard too.
Yeah, I mean, it would make a lot of sense for Buffalo because they have the assets and he's locked up for another 2 years. I don't think Toronto makes any sense. I was told by somebody that Toronto is not in on him, but you've heard from other people that they are in.
They were at one point, whether or not they are now.
I don't think they are now. I think they were looking at. They might be looking at Gavrikov, but the report that came out again over the weekend that Gavrikov will not sign an extension with a Canadian team, that pours cold water on because Toronto would want to sign him long term if they traded for him. If they have to give up a first round pick for Gavrikov, they would want to sign him and do an extension. And if he doesn't want to sign with a Canadian team, then I don't think they'll trade for him.
Yeah, I heard that too, but I heard Toronto might be a possibility still that he might be the only Canadian team that he's interested in. So I'm not sure.
That was the case with McCabe, but I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that with Gavrikov. So
it's not that hard to convince somebody to go to Toronto. Really, at the end of the day, I mean, if Toronto makes a reason,
hold on, he may have a reason. He just doesn't want to be in Canada. So
that's possible. Yeah. Sure, that's definitely possible. But at the end of the day, hockey players can be convinced by if Dubas calls them up and says, "Hey, we really, really want you. We think you're a big part of our team. We're making this trade. We're giving up a lot to get you. We think that you can help us win a cup." That can change things sometimes.
Yeah, and Dubas has a good relationship with Daniel Milstein, who's his agent. So I mean, but I think that because that relationship with other players that have been on the Leafs, they would know for sure pretty quickly whether he'd be willing to sign a contract. And if that report from Kelly Rudy is true, then they'll probably have moved on from Gavrikov to somebody else.
Yeah. No, that's. I think you're probably right there. I mean, so let's see what else do we have here.
Well, one final thought on it. What's interesting, and I just thought about this. Even though for years we've kind of thought, Edmonton needs to fix its defense because they're not strong enough defensively, but I think where this team is now, I think they'd be better served with Karlsson than Chychrun, because Karlsson, is like, Eck and I both agree on. He just fits that offense so well, and they really not had any. Well, there aren't any players like him.
He's a quarterback. He's a quarterback, and you've got McDavid and Draisaitl as receivers. Essentially, is what you got.
Right.
That's an unbelievable, scary thought for people.
That's been breakout already in the league. Like watching him live the other day, they have the fastest breakout already in the league, and you add Karlsson to that. Wow.
That's been his dynamic going back to Ottawa, because he puts the other team on defense with his offensive ability, so he doesn't have to play good in his own zone. So
yeah, and it does make the defense better because of his puck possession. I mean, when I watched him in Detroit, like he just had the puck all the time.
Yeah.
And the other thing about it is it's funny to me what had been a liability in the length of his contract now all of a sudden looks like a plus. Like the Oilers now have him, this guy's going to be 100-point scorer. And if the Oilers can get him, they've got him 4 years. And 4 years at 7, if they can make that work.
Sure.
That's a pretty good deal to have a player like Carlson. I mean, he's not ancient.
No, he's not ancient, and he has been able to stay healthy this year as opposed to the last few years. That's the only, that's the same concern with Chychrun, Kev. I mean, I know I sort of dwell on the injury thing a lot.
No, you don't like, no.
No, of course not. But with him, he has broken down every year until this year, and he has stayed healthy, and he is fantastic. If they could get some sort of guarantee that he could stay healthy all the time, then it's a no-brainer to trade for him because he's one of the best players in the league.
Yeah, but I mean, injuries are part of the game. A lot of guys get hurt, and then they go, 3 or 4 years where they don't get hurt. I mean, I just think you can't worry about that. So
now, Russ, there's a report came out this morning that Kraftstoff has requested a trade.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I mean, I don't blame him. Again, he's not been treated well by the Rangers. Let's be fair. He hasn't had a shot. And I get it. It was rocky at the beginning, but I kind of said it on the show with that Chris Drury was kind of going to hold it against him, and for the most part, he has. The only way that wasn't going to be the case is if Kravtsov, for the way they were playing him, was going to just put up unbelievable numbers like Pavel Bure, then they probably would have forgave it simply because of that. But he needs time to develop in the game. Going back to the draft, I wouldn't have drafted him because I didn't like everything about him. But he can play in the NHL. The question is, what can he do in the NHL? We don't really know until you put him on a top power play, you put him on a second line, and you leave him there. Rangers aren't going to do that. So the best
they really had a hard time, from what I understand. I talked to somebody up there. They really had a hard time with his speed. They say he hasn't been able to keep up with the top 2 lines. He says the top six. The top 6 forwards.
I've seen him when they put him on the second line. I didn't necessarily notice it. But I can't say that's out of the realm because they do have 2 very fast lines. He's not the fastest skater.
Yeah.
But he's 6'3", whatever. So then put him on a third line. It's okay. Yeah. I mean, in this league, he's got to be there every night. He's got to be there for 15 minutes a night. You got to just let him find his way. He's pretty good defensively, and he's pretty good in the corners. He has abilities. But, again, he's not had a chance to put it together. So trade him. That's the best thing to do for the player, honestly.
Puljujarvi for Kravtsov.
I don't think that helps the Rangers.
I know, I'm kidding.
I do hate when players ask for trades. I do hate that. That is something I can't stand. Personally, I get it. It's part of the business, but it's one of those things. It's like, I don't know. It's really it's just, especially in this case, like the Rangers are playing so well. Like the Rangers are looking. They're on such a high right now. For him to come out and throw that monkey wrench into it, if I'm Drury, I'm just getting him out of there. I don't know. You don't need that, right? I mean, am I wrong?
I don't know. I mean, I'll let Kev answer that first.
Well, I think it's less of a big deal than it once was. Now I think that there's players are far more business savvy. I mean, this is just total speculation because I've never really talked to it. But I think in the old days, people kind of saw that as a betrayal. But I think now everybody says, I worry about my business, you worry about yours. And, we try to make it all work kind of going in. So I think people are curious about it, but they understand people got to do. I mean, we all interviewed Dylan Larkin after the All-Star game, and he said multiple people multiple players ask him, why aren't you signed? But, it wasn't, they weren't trying to hold blame one party or another. They were just curious of how it was working. So, and I think that's kind of it is. I think everybody just kind of shrugs it. Okay, Kravtsov wants out. Well, just like it's no different than players being, always there's 3 or 4 players that are unhappy with the coach because of playing time and so.
I'll give a good example, like what they did with Nils Lundkvist. Fine, Dallas needed him. They traded him. They got a pick. They got a really good pick. Dallas puts him right in. He's got 15 points. He's on pace to be like a 25-point defenseman. He's only 22.
Right.
He's going to get better. But he wasn't going to do that with the Rangers the way they were using him and the way they were not using him.
Right.
Rats up. Like he's probably going to go a similar path, but you got to let him break out of there.
And now they turned that first-round pick into Tarasenko and into Mikkola, and I think they've scored 12 goals in 2 games since they made the trade. So it's worked well for them. I mean,
but that's not the way they're going to win the playoffs. Like we know that.
No, but it's not
offense for now.
It's nice to have that gear, Russ. It's
no question. But
that's true.
That's not going to.
I've got something that might be kind of fun to talk about because I got asked this question by a friend, and I'm going to do this thing after the trade deadline. I'm going to do this thing called Matchup Mondays, where I'm going to have us rank 5 players in a category, and they're from all different kinds of historically. Like, for example, when one of them, and the one I was starting off with playing around with was who's the toughest, best scorer of all time, and like you immediately go to like, okay, Brendan Shanahan, Gordie Howe obviously comes right.
I would think Gordie Howe,
Mark Messier or Gordie Howe, in my opinion.
You basically named all of them except for the one that I think is, which is actually, Gordie Howe's a great name for sure, but I'm going with Alex Ovechkin on this because I honestly think that I would go Alex Ovechkin. No, just based on this, toughest, best scorer of all time, Ovechkin.
Okay, if the problem is how you define tough, because if you're talking a cheap shot artist, okay, Ovechkin.
No, Ovechkin, not just cheap shot artist.
He's the best scorer of all time. He's a Russian tank. He's a physical freak, but he got in a few fights early in his career. He's not an open ice checker. He's a guy who takes cheap shots.
No, he does
hit with it because
he's not just a cheap shot.
Yeah, he is.
He does hit, but he doesn't hit like Messier would with the elbows in the corner.
He's not as mean as either Howe or Messier.
No,
not even close.
No.
Right, but when you look at his hit numbers combined with his goals, he just blows away everybody else.
But you got to remember, hit numbers didn't exist in these other guys.
I know, but if we were would Gordie's hit numbers be that high too? I'm sure.
That's why I said Shanahan, because I mean, Kev, you saw him. You had a ringside seat for him in Detroit, but even going back to him in New Jersey and Hartford and St. Louis, he dropped the gloves with anybody, and he could score 45 to 50 goals. He was insane how good he was.
Well, but I do think you can't. I mean, numbers really don't tell the story on hits.
Sure.
I mean, there's hits, and then there's punishing hits, and I think that's where Messier really excelled, and Howe did as well. And
I saw Gordie Howe laying hits like that at 42.
The other thing about, I mean, Gordie could also tell you within. His son told me, Mark told me that he could tell with forecast within 3 or 4 stitches how many stitches a guy would get after Gordie picked him. So like he knew his craft well.
I think Gordie was the guy, because I bet, and Kev, you probably know this better than me because I only saw some of Gordie. I'm sure a lot of guys were like afraid of him to the point where they weren't even going to go in the corner.
That's the point I was just about to make. Like a lot of times, like he may not even have a hit in a game, but he was the toughest guy in because everyone moved away from him. Kind of like when Scott Stevens was playing, and then everybody took the puck to the other side to where Stevens was because they didn't want to have to deal with him.
Nobody was skating up the middle when Scott Stevens was playing.
No.
Well, nobody was skating on his side for sure.
Right.
That's the whole thing. Like entries always went on the opposite side of Stevens. So
I would put Ovechkin third, though. I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Yeah, no, Ovechkin's good. He does have a lot of hits, and the size make a difference. I remember, just as an anecdote, Mark Howe again told me this story that the hardest he's ever been hit in any hockey game is when a guy was roughing him in the corner and his dad barged in, coming in to cream the guy, but Mark was underneath him. I have never been hit as hard as I was hit on that double crunch that he got.
That's pretty awesome. I do find it I do think that's a part of Ovechkin's game though that isn't recognized enough. And I think that even now, obviously, even now, a guy who's going for a scoring record like that at his age should be playing not the way he's playing. He's still hitting people left and right. He's still, and you would think he was going to try to get this Gretzky record, going to stay healthy. He doesn't seem to care at all about staying healthy. Like Ovechkin just goes after people.
Yeah, but okay, he's got to play the way he has played before. He can't deviate from that. Like if you do that, you sort of lose part of yourself.
Yeah, but that's not really. It's not like his hits generate scoring chances. They're really. That's not what he does with his hits.
No, but he can't.
Watch Ovechkin hits. They're another part of the game altogether. Like Ovechkin's scoring is often set up one-timer type goals.
Yeah, but Kev, Ovechkin has never been, and I don't think ever will be, a peripheral player. He winds up at the top of the circle on the power play with that one-timer, but he goes to the front of the net. He's physical. He's got to keep doing that if he wants to beat Gretzky's record.
Yeah, but I know what both of you were saying on this. Like he does have still an incredible number of hits, and he's older. And I'll use as a comparison Peter Forsberg, who the Avalanche did beg him to change his style, to be more of a perimeter player, to extend his career, because he was all beaten up by the time he got to 30, because, he would go in. I remember one time he went in and laid a heavy hit on Bob Probert because Probert had laid one on him. And Bob Probert said, I really respect that guy because nobody comes back at me, but Forsberg did. The problem is, Ovi is 240 pounds and Forsberg's 203.
Right.
So Ovechkin can still play this style because he doesn't often get the worst of hits.
Right.
Where Forsberg did at 203 pounds. So I think he can continue to do that. But I also agree with that. It's not part of his scoring deal. Like, it's not in on the forecheck that he's crunching guys. So
it's a totally different thing, and that's what's kind of crazy. Like, some guys do use the hits to set up scoring chances and stuff like that. And his hits are usually defensive hits more than they are often. Or guys, hitting guys with the puck, of course. But like, I was looking at his stats, versus Crosby, which is always fun to do, because their stats are so close point wise. They're always like right next to each other, points totals, right? But hits wise, I mean, Crosby's at 961 and Ovechkin's at 3,331.
Yeah, well, they're different players, but
different players,
Heck, I'll give you something misleading though. We know that hits are also, especially at home, are definitely pumped up by the hometown scorer. And here's an example, and I wouldn't even have known this if I didn't look up hits leaders. Believe it or not, Dustin Brown's ahead of Alex Ovechkin. Would anybody here on the panel would have thought that?
Well, Dustin Brown is a big hitter, but yeah.
Ahead of Ovechkin?
No, yeah, but yeah.
I had somebody contact me on Twitter over the weekend and say and ask what did Dustin Brown do to earn a retired number and a statue in Los Angeles? And I said he captained 2 Stanley Cups.
Right.
Well, and his popularity as a player. I mean, sure. I've long had this conversation with people, and it's really hard to convince them about this. But you're confusing Hall of Fame stature with retired numbers. Retired numbers should be about popularity with the fan base.
Yes.
That's what Dustin Brown was. He's popular.
He's a homegrown guy. He's staying there his whole career. He's won 2 cups. He is a really good player. Like, offensively, he's
high character guy.
Yeah, character guy.
Yeah. So I mean, that's totally warranted.
Wendell Clark is not a Hall of Famer, but in the minds and hearts of Leaf fans, he's probably the most popular player in the last 40 years on that team. So he deserved his number retired. He deserved a statue on Legends Row. Like you said, it's not Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it's not Hall of Fame. So
I'll give you one more fun, what I think is a fun comparison, because somebody brought this up to me too, and I really like this one.
Okay.
Who is better? Who the better overall player? Forsberg or Kucherov?
Forsberg.
Peter Forsberg or Philip Forsberg?
Yeah. Peter Forsberg or Kucherov?
Forsberg.
I think he could beat you in a lot of other ways, and we never really got to see him fully healthy.
Yeah, Forsberg. I mean,
yeah, I don't even think that's close, and I love Kucherov. So I mean, I just Forsberg is one of my all-time favorite players.
He's one of my favorite too, but I think that there's a definite case to be made for Kucherov in that comparison.
No, I don't think so.
No. I mean, I think positionally on top, because Forsberg was a dominating center, a physical center, who, the 1-2 punch with him and Sakic in Colorado was, it was tough to match up to. So,
right.
No, I mean, don't get me wrong. Kucherov is a fantastic player.
Well, I mean, he's an MVP too. They're both MVP type players, right? They're both MVP players. They're both great assist players. I mean, they both both great passers, right? They both have won Stanley Cups.
But Forsberg, puck possession wise, the way he could take over the offensive zone, Kucherov does that in spurts, but not the way Forsberg could do it for an entire shift if he wanted to.
I would say that if you rank the players that I've seen in terms of protecting the puck, Forsberg's in the top 2 or 3 that I've ever seen.
Right.
Yeah, and Kucherov is not in the top 10.
Right. I mean, that's not his thing necessarily.
He does it on a level like Jágr. I mean, Jágr always used to he'd stick his butt out, and you wouldn't be able to get the puck away from him. And Forsberg was just as tough in terms of puck possession. So
no question.
I'm going to just say this: Mark Lazarus is reporting Jonathan Taves is not on the ice in practice, so
he hasn't been on the ice for the last 4 or 5 days.
It's 4 or 5 days. Well,
he has some sort of illness.
He has an illness. Okay.
A non-COVID illness.
Okay.
Kev, the interesting thing that came up again over the weekend was, the talk about Tyler Bertuzzi, and there are other players that you can put into this mix, that the teams in the Atlantic Division and a team like Dallas all seem to be talking about the same player. Like Bertuzzi is connected to Tampa. He's connected to Dallas. He's connected to Edmonton. He's connected to Toronto. And these teams might be in a position where they're bidding against each other for the same player. And usually that's throughout the league, but in a case of Toronto and Tampa, it's teams that are going to face each other in the first round and one bidding against the other for the same guy. Yeah.
I mean, there's the issue, and I've brought this up before, but not everybody watches every show every day, so I'll repeat it. The lure of Bertuzzi is there are multiple reasons why teams like him. Number one, he's at $4.75 million. The Red Wings can retain salaries. They're not in the same position as the Coyotes where they don't want to pay the salaries. If they can get a better return, they will be happy to do that. So now you get a 2.3. That's below the minimum or the average salary in the NHL. You can fit him in. And that's important for a team like Tampa that just has no room. So that's number one. Number two, he plays what we could, even though he's never been in the NHL playoffs because he's been with the Red Wings, but he plays at what would be called a playoff style.
Yeah, sure.
What he does is he goes hard to the net. When there's trouble, he's the first in line. He's hard in the corners. He can get the puck. He competes real hard. Now, he's been hurt this year. Different kinds of injuries. Both hands have surgery, and they were totally accidental. Blocking a shot, broke his. We don't know exactly, but he broke something in his hand. Right. And then he got hit by a teammate's shot in the hand while he was where was he? Right in front of the net. Doing what he's supposed to be doing, and then. He's tried to come back early, and I think we're guessing he pulled a groin. It's hard to tell, but he's come back from that. So his numbers are way down. He's only got 2 goals in 18 or 19 games. But it's happenstance more than anything else. So the Red Wings still want a lot from him, was what I'm hearing. And the Red Wings knew when they started negotiations it was not going to go well because Yzerman doesn't think Bertuzzi's value is as high as I'm sure he does. We don't know what those numbers are. So I think they will be able to trade. I think they'll get something for him. It just remains to be seen whether it's, a first round pick, or will it be a prospect and a draft pick? It's really kind of hard to tell. And, I've had an explanation now because Mike has been reporting based on hearing what Elliot Friedman had to say and Jeff Merrick about the what's going on with the immigration and his vaccination status. I finally understand it. I finally got someone to explain it to me. Right. Yeah, and what it has to do with is the fact that if he's traded to a Canadian team, of course, he would no longer have an American work visa because he would be with the Canadian team. So it's not the Canadian that you worry about. he then would be an unvaccinated Canadian citizen trying to get back into the U.S.
Okay.
That's the problem. And they don't know whether it would be a problem. They're concerned that it could be a problem.
Right.
So anyway, because there are plenty of Canadian citizens who are coming back and forth, with that. And I've talked to some Canadian citizens who say, they're never asked, and there are other Canadian citizens that my colleague Bob Duff has talked to who said, yeah, I do get asked, whether I'm vaccinated and whether I can prove it. So
I do want to mention with the Islanders, keeping an eye on their fan base, and I have friends that are Islander fans. A lot of their fans would like to see Lane Lambert fired, and look, it's not his fault, but they're mad to the point where that's what they're talking about all the time now. They're very turning into a disillusioned fan base very quickly, Kev.
Well, okay, let me just put this out there because it fits along the same path. Now the Islanders are on the outside looking into the playoffs right now. The numbers don't look good, but they could still make it. I mean, if
I think they're only 3 back. I think only 3 points.
Right, but they played the most games in the NHL. I think Buffalo's got 4 games in hand. But that's it's still within the realm of possibility. Toronto has the 4th best record in the NHL. Toronto loses to Columbus as they normally do against a bottom 5 team. They don't show up for a part of the game and they lose. And Damian Cox this morning in the Toronto Star comes out and says that the Leafs should fire Sheldon Keefe in favor of either Bruce Boudreau or Joel Quenneville or Barry Trotz, or he's just throwing out names. I mean, we're talking about we're 30 games left to go in the regular season. And in the case of Toronto, they have a top 5 record in the league, and it just makes absolutely no sense that you would fire a coach at this time.
No,
and the Islanders, you're going to fire a coach 50 games.
No, they won't. But it's just that's what the fan base wants because they're looking at the math. They know it's not great. They lost some tough games recently, and that's the problem. They're also looking at the team, realizing it's marginally better, but it's not that much better, and it's a tough place right now. Right in the NHL, even an Islander team who is good, like they can beat the Flyers handily and 4, 5, 6 other teams handily. They haven't been winning the right games, so they're in a tough spot, and I get it. I get why the fans are upset, and I don't know if it'll cost Lou his job, but Lane Lambert's not going to get fired.
Well, the Islanders defied logic, Russ. They lost to Montreal with Montreal wearing the blue jerseys.
Yeah.
Which was I think that was the first game that they won with the blue jersey.
Yeah.
I looked yesterday and for something I was writing, and if you take the 6 or 7 teams, I think it's 7 teams that are vying for a wild card spot in the Eastern Conference.
Right.
If you take those 7 teams, none of them had won more than 5 games out of the last 10.
Mm.
That's how bad it's been. So, the Penguins are struggling. They've got the lead. The Islanders, haven't been able to make up any ground. The Florida Panthers, they've had some extra points, so they've made some ground up, but they only had 5 and 10, and they lost their last game as well. So
Buffalo got housed by Calgary on the weekend, 7-2, which brings into question Russ Luukkonen again because he looked like a sieve in that game. And
I'm not allowed to speak the truth about Luukkonen, or I get destroyed online. But again, he's just not ready. That's
the thing. He's too young. Like,
right.
He's what is he 22 or 20? I don't think he's 23.
24.
He's 24.
He was. I'm pretty sure he was hurt for a few years. So I'll double check.
He's 24, right in that range. Look, I mean, he'll play more games. There is talent there, but he's just not ready, and that is something that is going to hold them back. Will they get they still might get a goalie if they still stay this close. I could see them getting a cheap goalie. I could, but we'll see. I mean, I don't know.
There's nobody really available. I had this conversation with the GM who said, I was just asking him, what he thought about the goaltenders. He goes, I don't really see anyone out there that I'm excited about.
Yelkovic could be an upgrade for some of their guys.
Luukkonen is 23, turns 24 on March the 9th, so next month. So, yeah.
I mean, he could be an upgrade. The other team is, again, their fan base is kind of being a little unfair. the Penguins fan base is just destroying Ron Hextall for not making deals. And it's like, okay, Ron, I get it. Ron Hextall has kept this team in it in a way because he could have decided to rebuild, but he and Burke decided, listen, we can't rebuild with the core here still. So we're going to keep going with this. And they added Carter and they did other things. And they're still a pretty good team. And they're waiting to see what the health of Jerry is. But in the interim, just what kind of deals do you expect this guy to be able to make? Like, they're not loaded with assets. I don't understand what the fans want from him.
Yeah, and still in the NHL and untrue in the NFL. But in the NHL, we still, more often than not, re-sign veteran players. We do not let them ride off into the sunset. Now, not always, but I would say the vast majority we do that. So
yeah, and I was just going to mention this because what Northern says the Penguins and the Kings have been linked to Cam Talbot, who right now is out injured, but he's supposed to be back in like the next week to 10 days. But the question is whether the terrible injury to Anton Forsberg will affect that, because Forsberg, I think they said he tore the MCL in both knees, and he's out
poor guy. 2
to 3 months. And it was sort of an odd play where he got Zach Hyman got pushed into him and he fell awkwardly. But if they trade Talbot, I mean, they'd have to get a goaltender back or find a goaltender to plug the hole, because they wouldn't have anybody to. And Kev, they seem, even though they're well out of the playoffs, they continue to seem to want to be guys buyers at the deadline, rather than subtract.
Yeah, but I mean, if they'll commit to being just total sellers, I mean, there's an easy deal there where you take Peterson back from LA, you trade Talbot to LA, but LA pays half his salary. And then you roll the dice with him, and then this summer, if you're Ottawa, you look for a goalie. So
So right now, if
there was something else, Mike, with Ottawa.
Go ahead.
We did see, and I forget exactly what the phrase was, that I think it was with contracts. They could only do certain contracts now with ownership sort of being in flux.
Right.
So that is sort of, they need to sell sort of quickly, otherwise they're not going to really be giving out any extensions unless they're sort of market value. You got to keep the guy sort of extension. So it's something to keep an eye on.
And reportedly, they were asked about the availability of DeBrincat, and they said he's not available because he's at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's what brought it up, was DeBrincat, what they would do with him.
So, okay, good show, guys. We'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For the departed Eklund, for Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.